Welcome back to another Cutter Simpsons Unhinged. It's a Saturday, you know what that means. Simpsons Unhinged. And today we're going to be looking at a season 29 episode. But we're going to go through quickly, I hope, what episodes I have done of this thing. And don't worry, the episodes are listed in the playlist down below, obviously. All right, so we did Lisa Goes Gaga, about Lady Gaga, Homer, that 90s show, talk about Homer Marge's relationship issues, Homer and Bongo, about Bongo being sold off and Homer not trusting Abe anymore, and dogs. Homer at the bat that beat the Cosby Show first run, Maud's death and how they changed a lot of things. Tis the 15th season, the Olympics episode, well, the 15th season episode, Homer tries to be good. Principal and the Pauper, yes, we did that one. Homer and a Pooh, yes, we did that one. Lisa's a vegetarian, yes, I did that one. Love is a many strangled thing. Talk about why the Simpsons say that Bart needs to be strangled. Tata, why? How Faust. Forsaking Me, that's the one when Todd can't remember what Maud is and denounces God and Flanders forces him to live with the Simpsons. Lisa gets an F1. That's the one that Lisa drives F1. The gay marriage episode, there's something about marrying and that narrative about that. Diary Queen, when Bart finds that and his diary does better, but Lisa ruins it for some stupid reason. The Family Guy Simpsons crossover 2014, giving the Simpsons a second wind. Bart the mother, when he did the lizard eggs. The Italian Bob talked about Sergeant Love in Italy. Kill Gill, the episode that's on Marge's mental problems spring up, which I talked about in the subplot. And then, of course, there was Homer's Enemy. I talked about that famous episode that Homer gets praised while Rams get spit. That Homer Ned's Hail Mary pass about the Super Bowl 2005, Trash of the Titans that sees the Simpsons move Springfield around after Homer's ineptness. The FIFA episode, which I croaked out. Who Shot Mr. Burns? Talked about that narrative. Treehouse of Horror, the first one, and then I talked about all the Treehouse of Horror things. Homer's Phobia, about Homer juggling his hatred of gays with his love for his son. Dog Canada, the episode, that they go to Canada and it was cool and all that. And then the Bart Mango banner, in which Bart's mooning of the American flag gets basically bastardized and all that. Mark did a season 4 episode, March versus Montreal, or Last Exit to Springfield, which is the best Springfield episode. And the Real Gyms actually did an episode on the Last Exit to Springfield yesterday. Season 37, The Past, Present, and Future, about how the Simpsons handle that. Of course, this current season. Farting over the 300th. Oh, wait, isn't it 302nd? Shush! Episode, all that. Talked about Barthood and how Bart and Homer's problems may project towards Bart and Lisa's relationship. She a Little Faith from season 13 that Lisa turns Buddhist. No Loan Again, talk about Homer and his money issues. And all that. And last week I talked about Homer's Odyssey and There's No Disgrace Like Home, the narrative. All right, so good intro. And now we go to season 29. I know it feels like a terrible season, but this episode made sense. And we'll talk about that and the Springfield election, quote unquote, election races throughout the years. Let's go to season 29's episode that Marge becomes mayor. No, I'm not kidding. Jerk Homer, Marge's worries, Bart's pranks, Lisa's causes, Maggie not talking a lot, Grandpa being senile, Patty and Selma boring Marge, Artie Sif is a jerk, Chief Wiggum making things happen, Mr. Burns being a dick. You can never stop the Simpsons. Heaven knows they've been trying for years and they still come back for more. 37 seasons is a bit much, don't you think? It's a crazy Simpsons. Something happens. A do 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 do. This is not a clip show. Have no fear. I've got topics for years. All right, so you're seeing the picture. You see Marge as the mayor with Lindsay Nagel and Homer Simpson. Well, how did we get to this point? Well, here we go. We're in the 29th season, the 6th episode called The Old Blue Mayor. She ain't what she used to be. Ain't what she used to be. Ain't what she used to be. Well, The last two are mine. You know the old song, the old gray mare, the folk song. Anyway, Marge becomes mayor of the town. So anyway, they rarely talk about March versus the monorail after March versus the monorail, but the track is now a sky park. At the official opening, Mayor Quimby turns on the electricity, which actually causes the monorail car to activate and destroy the boardwalk. It ran down Sebastian Cobb, the scientist who helped Marge in March versus the monorail, and Homer for that matter, although Homer thought it, because he was a scientist, he was Batman. It's not Batman! So anyway, it actually crashes into Leonard Nimoy's memorial statue. Of course, Leonard Nimoy, I think, was dead at the time. So anyway, at the town hall meeting about this disaster, Mayor Quimby gets talked to about Marge's suggestions to fix the town, but Mayor Quimby decides to have some sexist remarks, which Marge gets so mad at that the family makes her run for mayor of Springfield. The opinion polls have put Quimby above Marge. However, Marge thinks about the thing when there's a question about her legacy as mayor of Springfield. She decides to um, promise at the debate to extinguish the tire fire. And practically everything works out, and Marge becomes mayor, taking on Quimby. And it was like just shocking that Marge actually pulled it off. So Marge relishes being the mayor, and then she knew that she had to keep her promise. So when the bulldozers arrive at the tire fire, Marge actually talks to the guy who actually is the souvenir stand operator for the landmark, and he says in his whole Jimmy Stewart type of stutter. And if you watch Jimmy Stewart stuff from the celebrity roast, you know about his stutter and they make fun of it. Truth of the matter, you shouldn't make fun of stutters. So anyhow, the souvenir stand operator tells Marge that he needs the tire fire because the souvenirs he has sold has put his kid through school, and he named a stutter after him. So Marge feels sympathy and calls off the bulldozers, and she's accused of breaking her promise. However, Marge and her support team, which includes Lindsay Naegle, decide there's another option and decides to buy the souvenir stand and give the guy the money and all that. So the operator declines, saying that he can't do it and all that. And Marge insults him, learning that he was a Vietnam veteran whose best friend died stepping on a landmine. Marge's whole sympathetic thing and her conscience makes her realize she can't go through with the plan to get rid of the tire fire. So basically, her support is damaged. So anyhow, her support team of Lindsay Naegle, Professor Frick, and Julio, from 3 Days at the Condo, come in, and Marge decides to hold a live broadcast from the Simpson kitchen to try to win back the voters, to win back her sympathy, her support, if you will. So there would be a focus group too. However, Homer has some embarrassing antics, including wearing a belt full of wieners. One wrong wiener out of place, and he'll show his real wiener. Anyhow, so the antics are embarrassing to Marge. However, it actually fills the room with laughter and causes her approval rating to skyrocket. So then she decides to encourage herself to publicly make fun of Homer. He gets a sandwich named after him. He gets insulted at a roast, which he tries to strangle Krusty, but it's for the whales. And his own balloon in the Thanksgiving Day parade that farts confetti. However, she realizes that Homer is being a laughing stock, and she played a part of it. She actually goes to Mayor Quimby to ask about balancing being mayor and a family life. However, Mayor Quimby basically says that no, it's not possible and all that, even though Mayor Quimby is a womanizer. So anyway, the first night in office, he actually noticed how attracted he is to Martha, and Martha thanks Marge for giving her husband back. Of course it would. Anyhow, Marge then, at a christening of a manhole cover, is told by Lindsay Naegle to make a joke about Homer, but then she realizes she can't and professes her love for Homer, saying that everyone needs to find a Homer in their lives. And of course, the crowd's upset. And then in the final part of the episode, in the final scene, 8 years later, Marge and Homer walk through a hall dedicated to her political career, and she actually makes contact with the aliens, which one of them looks like Kang or Cordell. Who can tell? Marge doesn't want to go near the last exhibit, although Homer says they have to pass through it to get to the cafeteria. So they do, and unfortunately, it's practically a picture of Marge being impeached and Quimby was reinstated as the mayor of Springfield. It's kind of weird when they say 8 years later because I figured before watching the final scene, I figured that that Springfield had just basically had enough. That Marge supports Homer and then screws over Marge and wants to elect Mayor Quimby, saying that a sexist, corrupt mayor is better than a Marge type. So the AV Club gave it a B, saying that it commits to examining how Marge's rise to power as mayor relies upon the knee-jerk, irresponsibly swayed townspeople that are susceptible to manipulation based on selfish instincts. It kind of feels like the Trump elections of 2016 and 2024 and all that crap. Well, after all, Facebook did get corrupt on that one. The Simpsons is a cynical show as it resists the temptation to demonize or lionize civil mindedness or patriotism. The people of Springfield flock to Marge not because she's a clearly better candidate person than Diamond Joe Quimby, who is elected, perennially elected, womanizing, cartoonishly corrupt, but because Lindsay Naegle convinces her to use micro-targeted campaign. And micro-targeted campaign, a lot of people hate on it, especially, you're on Facebook and you get all these campaign things that are either true or false. Then a geek gave the show 3.5 out of 5 stars. And then there was a song explaining what voters look into a candidate. So that just is like, what the heck is going on here? So, you know, that was just pure awkwardness. That, micromanaging and microaggressions towards the polls. But that's not all we're going to talk about. We're going to be talking about Springfield's mayoral elections and elections in general and how corrupt they really are. Okay, so as you can see, there's a still. If you're watching this instead of listening to this, you see Sideshow Bob beating Mayor Quimby in an election. Well, that's one of the elections I'll be talking about. Remember how George H.W. Bush moved into the Simpson neighborhood, across the street from the Simpsons in Two Bad Neighbors? And he even said that they wanted to go to the city that had the lowest voter turnout in America. Well, that could be the apathy of Springfield in the first place. Springfield has had some great mayors in the past. There was that one episode, can't remember what season, 23 or 24, that it's learned that the Springfield town song was basically a carbon copy of many cities like Calgary, Area 51, Mongolia, or even Austin, Texas, as Mo exposes it. And we learned that there was actually a flashback scene about the Springfield song, and that Mayor Moman came in. So Hans Moman was actually the mayor of Springfield for a long time and all that, and looked pretty healthy compared to what he looks like now. Mayor Moman basically admits his faults and then gets put on a horse and ridden out of town. And then after that, he says he bounced the books 8 times, which means that he was a pretty good mayor. Compare that to, of course, Diamond Joe Quimby. So allegedly, Mayor Quimby uses influence from his family because there was actually an episode a few years beforehand. I mean, you know what I mean. That we learned about the Quimby family tree and all that, and the corruption, and how Marge actually has a relative close to the Quimby household that you didn't know about. Regardless of that, yeah, the elections are just like awkward and weird in Springfield. Not just the mayoral elections. Remember season two's episode that Homer catches Blinky the three-eyed fish, and Mr. Burns is accused of his environmental crap, and hell, the Geiger counters actually moved at the entrance. That tells you bad things, and how basically Burns is forced to put up $53 million of repairs. And this is 1992, if you must know. So Homer encourages Burns to be the governor because then he can see what's safe and what's not. Marge is not happy with Homer being around Burns as an election thing. And Homer basically says that he has to do so or else Mr. Burns could fire him. Well, Marge says, you should cheer for Mary Bailey. And he goes, Mary Bailey isn't going to fire me if I don't help him out in the election. And that kind of makes sense. So Burns tries everything. He does an infomercial about Blinky and the three-eyed fish and had an actor imitating Charles Darwin telling him about the natural theory of evolution and all that. Burns is about to take victory in the governor's race over Mary Bailey, but then has to eat his own creation, the three-eyed fish, which Marge ends up having. I guess Bart still has Blinky, but that can't be right. But nevertheless, Burns loses the election and vows that Homer will pay for what he has done. Marge does cheer Homer up. And it actually makes sense. It could be that Marge may have told Mary Bailey to tell Burns if he goes after Homer, then he'll get in deep trouble. Maybe that's why Homer keeps his job. That's my theory. Of course, there was the episode, Sideshow Bob Roberts, when Sideshow Bob's in prison, and Butch Barlow, who is the Simpsons version of Rush Limbaugh, basically lambasts Mayor Quimby, and then Bob calls in and says that he was sent to jail for stupidity and all that, despite the fact that he did frame Krusty for armed robbery, and Bart found out, and then he comes back to marry Selma and wants to kill her for the insurance money, but Bart breaks that up, and then the Cape Fear parody that he's ready to kill Bart, but Bart distracts him by making him sing the whole score to HMS Pinafore. So anyway, Sideshow Bob is championed by the Republican Party to go after Mayor Quimby's mayoral job, despite Bart's protests and all that. So Bob kind of does a good job and all that. So Bart and Lisa decide to be on Quimby's team to try to thwart Sideshow Bob because of personal things, and Sideshow Bob's not too happy with it. They do some kind of electoral debate, which Larry King actually gets to preside over. Yes, that is his real voice, and the Simpsons people in Springfield hoon and holler, kind of like Married with Children for Fox. So anyway, Butch Barlow asks a pointed question at Mayor Quimby, trying to ruin him, but Mayor Quimby ends up having his hair styled like the devil, sweating a lot because of the cold, and shaking hands with the seniors for the Matlock Expressway, and then he gets turned into a devil, and then election night happens, and Homer says that he doesn't approve of Sideshow Bob's Bart killing policy, but he can't deny Bob's Selma killing policy. Boy, he really hates his sister-in-law. And then Krusty says that, well, while Bob did attempt to foil me for armed robbery, he'll make it up with those tax cuts. So because of those promises and all that, Sideshow Bob does beat Mayor Quimby 100% to 1%, which is a 1% margin of error. You can probably guess what that margin of error. So Bob becomes mayor and decides to do the Matlock Expressway, which Quimby did promise to the seniors, but then he purposely built it in the way of the Simpson house so that the Simpsons would have to move out. No thought of helping out Ned or the other Simpsons neighbor. So anyway, yeah. So the Simpsons have to move out. Bart is placed in kindergarten as revenge, but Bart and his weird mind, he actually thrives in kindergarten and all that. Lisa, of course, makes the comment, I don't know why one convicted felon got so many votes and another convicted felon got less. That's funny. So Lisa tries to get to the bottom of the election, and she gets help from Mr. Smithers, who actually goes behind Burns' back to try to help the Simpsons because of Sergeant Bob's policies against people like Smithers. So they find out that Bob inflated the photo numbers with people who are dead and even pets like Snowball 1. Bob is tricked by Lisa and Bart to confessing his crime, saying that basically he was just Butch Barlow's lackey. And then Sergeant Bob says, "No, I'm the main guy. Lies, lies. I did it all because you want the coldness of the Republican Party." Unfortunately, he gets sent to prison. Bart's put in fourth grade, although he's upset that he doesn't know who the dish ran away with. This is the spoon Bart. Of course. Um, and of course, let's talk about the safety salamander mayor race for Homer. See Homer run. There's a rash of break-ins, and Bart steals the sign of Bart Boulevard, Bart Avenue to impress the bullies and impress Desmond, Declan Desmond, who is trying to do a documentary about Springfield Elementary. And then that causes a massive pileup. The police, ambulance, and fire all crash into each other. And Homer, who tries to win Lisa's love after Lisa has some scathing comments about men in general. And J. Lord Pryor says that if you don't help Lisa with her problems with her daddy, she may hate men forever. I just can't see Lisa as a lesbian. But anyhow, you know the drill. So Homer dons the safety salamander to try to win Lisa's love back. And he does. He actually saves some people and all that, and threatens to put Nelson back in the flaming pile if he didn't get more than 3 cheers. Okay, 9. Hip hip hooray, hip hooray, hip hooray. All that. But then Mayor Quimby gets exposed by his own nephew, but he says that he can't lose unless there's a recall election. And everyone yells at him for a recall election. Even the pets do something. So he does. So the recall election is a phase that they try to find Mayor Quimby's opponent, if you will. Anyone can sign up, and if you get a prerequisite amount of votes, then you can actually challenge for that spot. So Homer is inspired by Lisa to do it, and he does it in a safety salamander suit, although Marge tells him that he would score more points if he doesn't. However, Homer says that if I'm not in that safety salamander suit, all I am is a multiple time felon. I mean, he gets a point. However, at Homer's press conference as the safety salamander, Ken Brockman outs him, not that way, but outs him by saying that, what about those pictures of you strangling your son? And we see him strangling Bart, and the picture says, "Good luck at your press conference, Dad." And Homer basically tries to deflect blame and all that. So he runs a decent campaign with Lisa helping him out. And he seems to do okay. There's that debate with the crazy cat lady and a few other candidates like Rainer Wolfcastle. And Crazy Cat Lady gives a good speech, even though that she rambles half the time. Says cats down everyone's pants. Homer then tries to give a good speech. Unfortunately, though, he had retched and had a massive stench in his suit. Marge tries to clean it for him, and then it all breaks apart. But Homer then says he did it for love to help Lisa out. And anyway, and Bart kind of ruins his campaign. And like I said, when I talked about George H.W. with the thing about the photo turnout in Springfield and the apathy, this was the key ingredient. Because Ken Brockman announces that no candidate got 5% of the needed votes to challenge Quimby in the runoff. So practically it meant that, the voters stayed away from the polls. I don't know who technically won, but, I think they needed a certain number of votes to run against Quimby, and then Quimby ends up being mayor anyway. Despite, them bitching about Quimby's policies and all that, they can't elect a new person until Marge in season 29, and then they put up with her for so long, and then they go back to the sexist Quimby. So yeah, about the micro targeting people with the election thing, it kind of makes sense. It can go well, and it could go south, like the recent shit in U.S. and Canada. So yeah, that's the elections. And I also gotta put in a Simpsons comics reference. There was this one Simpsons comics story about Mayor Quimby actually being recalled from office, meaning that he lost his job as mayor because of something to do with a beauty pageant contestant, and that even though that no one's running in the mayoral race, Quimby's going to lose his spot. So then they have to probably figure out who to replace him. And then Reverend Lovejoy gives him an offer he can't refuse. He gets Mayor Quimby to run, but he will run on a ticket of no beer on Sundays. And that gets Homer riled up, and Homer enters the race to face Mayor Quimby and all that. Fat Tony offers to help Homer out and be his campaign manager. And then they do this thing about a duck pond, but it destroys the duck pond. That Homer's over the top celebration. Lisa realizes that something's fishy. And then we find out that Fat Tony is working for both Quimby and Homer. Practically, that Lisa's fury that Fat Tony was going to ruin Homer's campaign and the duck pond to satisfy Quimby's needs, so he would backstab Homer. Homer then gets rid of Fat Tony after realizing that Fat Tony's working for both of them and gets Lisa to help him with his campaign, and he does quite well. He actually ties Mayor Quimby, despite Homer forgetting to vote, although Bart voted for him, and it cancels out. So that was practically a 50-50 tie. However, Homer decides to concede to Quimby on two promises. One, that the beer on Sunday ban is pulled, and also the duck pond is safe. And it actually insults Fat Tony and Reverend Lovejoy, although Quimby doesn't give a crap. And there was even a special runoff election. Remember in the season 10 episode that the kids are blamed for a drunken rampage by Homer and are told have a sundown curfew. And unfortunately, it's during the winter, which sundown's like 5:30 in the afternoon and all that. And the kids sneak off and expose parents' secrets, but then everyone's upset about their secrets being exposed and all that. And then there's a Showtime number. And then the senior citizens come in to try to destroy like the adults and the kids. So the adults and kids pair up to try to destroy the seniors, saying that there's nothing they can do about it. But there is. There's a special photo about a new curfew for anyone under the age of 70. So the sundown curfew is for everyone under 70 because the senior citizens voted numbers, as Lisa posts it, and it actually wins by one vote, and Homer forgot to vote. Homer says, well, it didn't matter anyway. It would have. It would have been a tie, and I think tie goes to the last thing. So the seniors for a while get to rule the town, but I think they get overpowered. So that's it. That's how mayoral elections go in Springfield. It's a bit of the good, and the good of the bad, and the good of the shit. So anyway, that's this week. Next week, another Simpsons episode on August 22nd. Another Saturday episode. We go to season 12. We go to potentially what might have been Homer's lowest point. And no, it's not when he framed Marge for drunk driving. It's when Homer has to earn money to help his family by doing stupid tricks for Burns and even goes into a pen enclosure. You ain't getting out, sweetheart, says Mo. That should tell you a lot. So we'll talk about that 12th season episode next week. I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.